Now, as I foreshadowed on last night's show, the budget was all about spending, all about putting the government fair and square at the centre of everything. First up, it's always important to make clear that this government's done very well when it comes to the pandemic. Yes, its JobKeeper and other interventions have kept people afloat during the pandemic. And even more importantly, their closure of international borders and implementation of hotel quarantine with the states have been the most crucial measures, the smartest steps that have kept this nation almost COVID-free. Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg are cashing in now on their successful management of the pandemic, and they're staying firmly in crisis mode, at least until the election, including in crisis spending mode, which will go on way beyond that election. Now, don't get me wrong, I reckon this is smart politics. It's irresistible. I think we expect politicians to behave like politicians, and I think the path they've chosen is the one most likely to win them re-election. Why? Well, because most voters like it, obviously. You just look at the way people get so excited about one infection in Melbourne or two last week in Sydney. And who could criticise better disability services, better aged care, better services for women's safety, more childcare, and more training to help people get into work? And best of all, more tax cuts for middle Australia and small business so that we can drive the economy with more of our own money. Tick, tick, tick for all of this stuff, of course. But yes, we have to worry about the debt because our kids and our grandkids are going to have to pay for all of this. And it also leaves us more vulnerable if there's another shock, if the economy turns bad or if interest rates kick up anytime soon. But what's done is done, and the debt and deficit argument's going to have to be left for another day. It's shunted out for serious attention about a decade down the track. But there is something else that worries me about the government's approach, and that's a kind of submission to the pandemic. You see, the thing that's really going to enable us to have a proper recovery, not one underwritten by government spending and debt, is if we get back to normal, open up our borders, open up our economy. But instead of pushing hard to do that as soon as possible, instead of being on the front foot, encouraging Australians to accept reality, to keep our responses proportionate, to push the envelope on opening up, on learning to live with the virus, with the help of vaccines, the government's going in the other direction now, hiding from the virus, pretending they can eliminate the virus. That's worked very well electorally for the premiers. So now Scomo and the coalition are doing the same. We saw in the budget yesterday the revised expectation for opening international borders. It's a full year from now, a year. And that's prompted Qantas today to push back its scheduled reopening of international flights. The Treasurer was very straightforward on this stuff today.
We will open the international borders when it's safe to do so, and that means basing our decisions on the medical advice. So we're unapologetic about putting the health of Australians first.
Yeah, just at the moment on handling the pandemic, we seem to be shrinking away from the world, going backwards, rather than pushing ahead to life beyond the pandemic. Have a listen to the Prime Minister in Parliament today.
We understand the times that we are in right now, Mr Speaker, and those times are that we have a global pandemic that is not better, Mr Speaker, but worse than it was a year ago. A global pandemic that has raged through the developed world and is now raging through the developing world as we speak.
Really? Worse than it was a year ago? Sure, we know countries like India are going through what Europe and North America went through last year, but we've got better treatments, we know more about COVID, case fatality rates have fallen sharply for over a year, and now vaccines are rolling out, dramatically improving the situation in the UK, in the US and elsewhere. Optimism should be on the rise. We should be talking up our return to a post-COVID normal. But it seems the federal coalition wants the sort of election that Western Australia and Queensland had, where incumbent governments were warning about the pandemic risk, claiming credit for keeping their population safe, unashamedly keeping their borders closed and promising to be best at keeping the virus at bay in the future. That's the re-election story for the Morrison government too now. It's a compelling economic and public health argument, to be sure. It's not the dynamic, free, rational and liberating one that some of us prefer. It's not the one that will push the economy to be as normal as possible, as soon as possible. It's not the low debt path. But as long as they don't stuff up the vaccine rollout, this is an approach that's likely to be politically successful. And that's a diagnosis every politician wants.